Oh, okay, good. Okay, I like the silence, so I'm gonna start now. All right, guys, thank you so much for coming tonight. I know it says Wednesday. There's a reason behind that. I will let you know. Thank you so much for coming and like hope you had the chicken. If you haven't had the chicken yet, the chicken is still there. It won't run away. Uh, yeah, and let's get started. So this is I think a second one for the year. So what we did is, or actually I did is, I don't do it often. I do it like in a gap because I have too much meetup going on. So I just like space it out a bit. Uh, and today we have about two speakers as well from SeekAsia, and we need to thank them as well for hosting us and doing this meetup tonight. So usually what happened, the reason Wednesday is before that, how many of you is the first time here for KLJS? Wow, all the young one are first time, okay. Young ones, the new generation. Okay, cool. So having said that, right, the actually reason is we've been doing this KLJS is originally is from Facebook group and become like from like I think 5 years already. This group is going on, and then we moved to Meetup.com now, and it's happened every Wednesday. So that's why it's called JavaScript Wednesday. So, but sometimes you need to change around, tweak around a bit. So sometimes you do it as a special editions because you want to move to Tuesday. So that's how it happened. And we have special because we also have speaker flying over as well. So we have two speakers today coming from Aussie, and make more sense to have it on Tuesday. It's on Wednesday because tomorrow is public holiday. So yeah. So having said that, thank you for SeekAsia having hers and hosting hers as well. I think probably I'll give them to a shout out as well later on. And yep, this one just a quick agenda and housekeeping. Housekeeping as usual, no bike. I mean minimal bike shading and everything. We are quite casual, not like a conference or what. We just have any questions that raise up. We are quite friendly. We don't eat. We don't chase you. We just remember your face. So other than that, it's quite fun. And if you want to mingle or networking, I was being told to say read out this. So please use the reception area if you want to mingle or network during the break, or if there's a break, you can use the behind that wall where you grab all the chicken and the food, right? So you can go there to minimize the noise and disruption to the presentation. And after the meetup, you don't leave any rubbish around. So please don't leave your rubbish around. You're gonna make sure this place is infected with cockroach, and the cockroach might chase them away. So please throw away the designated bins. The designated bin is right near the fridge there towards the left. Okay. So I think having said that, I'm gonna remind that a couple of times because they told me strictly about that. Okay. So this one I skip. That's for previous copy paste. So agenda today is arrival of food, 7:30 start. Obviously, we always late. And then we're gonna have the first speaker with Jahred. Am I pronouncing right? Yeah, okay. And then we have a quick shout out, Buzzcorner, quick one. And then we have a follow-up session with Michael, who's talking about web forms as well. And then you can mingle, network. We can go mama session or drink or whatever afterwards. So as usual, that's where the magic happens. So having said that, before the first speaker, I'm going to quickly invite Lavinia for a quick shout out for SeekAsia. She's coming very unhappily, so let's see. Are you hiring?
Hello, I just want to give a warm welcome for everyone. I'm Lavanya. I'm the engineering director at Seek. I am based in KL. At the moment, I'm taking charge of the candidate side of the online marketplace. I'm going to keep it very short. We have two speakers from Seek today, and I'm hoping that this KLJS and MyJS would be a continuous meetup. I believe we're planning every 2 months, and hopefully more companies support this group and we can keep this community ongoing. Meanwhile, enjoy this meetup. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, thank you. And if you want to know the Wi-Fi password as well, you can find her or there's any SeekAsia. Okay. So let's invite first speaker, Jahred. He's going to talk about using JavaScript at the edge to scale micro front end. So, yep. How many people of you are using micro front end, by the way? Just curious. Are you guys any of you using micro front end? Not even you. Okay. Good, good. Okay, good to know. All right. All right. Go ahead.
All right, is this working? Awesome. I'm a little bit concerned because I think I saw some Seek people not put their hands up when it was asked whether we use micro front ends. Because a little bit of a secret, we do use micro front ends or micro sites. I think I switched between them in slides, whether I call it micro front ends and micro sites. So that's going to be a good bit of fun trivia for you. So I'm here to talk about how we've been using JavaScript at the edge to scale micro front ends, how we've taken 80+ applications across 20+ teams to use one worker to enable them all. As mentioned, my name is Jahred. I'm an engineering manager at Seek. I write TypeScript, I build web platforms, and I talk about the web. My socials are all Jahred Hope. You can see my website, and I am from Melbourne, Australia. With introductions out of the way, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about my talk title, because it's kind of jam-packed with keywords. And I've just remembered, I forgot to set a timer for myself, so give me 2 seconds. I set a timer so I don't go over time. Couple of titles. JavaScript. Hopefully we all know what JavaScript is here, but I do lie a little bit. I actually mean TypeScript. I use TypeScript primarily day to day, but I really think they're interchangeable in value for this talk. Everything I talk about here would equally apply to both. Also the edge. If you haven't heard of it, it can mean different things, but I just mean run your compute closer to your users. We use CloudFlare Workers. There's also faster compute, AWS Lambda at edge. There's a lot of opportunity out there to run your compute close to your users. Scale, another term I use quite a lot. I just mean you've got more users, more applications, and more engineers. And that just means that a lot of simple things that you might otherwise overlook at a smaller scale get complicated. The example I give is that if a bug were to affect 1 in 1,000 people, it affects 60,000 people for us and becomes important to look at. I also mentioned micro front ends. At Seek, we use React. That's typically broken up into a bunch of different applications served on different pages that are owned by different teams. So what I mean by all of those. With the talk title explained out of the way, we can probably get on to what the actual talk is. Well, there's 4 sections. We've got a bit of background, so you can understand the position we were in, where we were at, and why we might have started to look for a new solution. Talking about how we decided to create a new model for our websites to understand what existed on them and how we wanted to think about them. And then a worker that we built, kind of in the talk title, the actual worker that we built and how it uses that model to serve our microsites, and then talk a little bit about how it's going. So the background. In the before times. Before we had our worker, things were quite simple. They were happy days. We only had a few sites. We had a single language and we had a single brand. If you wanted to load up a new route on the website, you would go over to your operations team and you would ask very nicely, excuse me, operations team, could I please have a new route? Could you do these things to it? Could you send it to my application? Pretty please. And they would go ahead and put it in their Nginx config. And they would send it through to production, all good. But because you would go and ask them to do that, everyone would ask for things slightly differently, and each team would do things that little bit differently, which was fine. It really was fine. It was a very mature system. It was well tested. The people who owned those systems worked well. It was great until we wanted to ship an Asia Pacific platform. Now we had multiple brands across both of our candidate and employer products. We had now 3 languages we needed to support. 3 just being where we are now. That's growing. We had multiple regions. Again, that may be growing. And because of that, we had a bunch of locales. Now, each of those websites were getting, all of those web applications were getting more complicated. So we knew we needed to change. We needed something new, probably something to replace that Nginx config. But we also needed to bring all of our existing applications along for the ride. But we needed them to work with all of these new brands, regions, and locales. So we needed something that would take all of these brands, all of these sites, and create this sort of new solution that would then spread out to all of these different microsites. Different languages, different paths, different sites would sometimes have different applications. And it wasn't all just web applications themselves, there was also APIs in there. Sorry. So we needed something new. But when we were looking at what to build, we kind of took a step back and just decided we probably need to rethink the model of our website. This would be the data that we use to send it in to drive the worker. That drive the worker. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to rethink that model of starting with the route. We don't want to go to the operations team and ask for a new route. We wanted to ask for a new application. We wanted to model the application first. So we started with, what's the application called? Who looks after it? What type of application it is? Then, once we had that core information, we wanted to follow standards by default. If you don't configure something, we're going to assume that you're doing things in the intended, ideal, simple way. We did want to allow people to diverge with intent, but make that really visible. If you were doing something different than standard, if you were configuring things in a different way, that should be really visible and really easy to see. With that said, I want to get onto the example. I want to show you what this model looks like. But before I do that, we probably need to talk about how it's stored. Otherwise, it won't really make sense. There's just a bunch of YAML files. I really like YAML as this kind of middle ground between something that is human readable and writable, but also is sort of really easy to load up with JavaScript, sort of read and write with JavaScript. We also store that configuration in GitHub. GitHub gives us that ability to have this really powerful change management system. And even though it's not code, it still allows us to branch, and people can self-service their pull requests to say, I'd like to add in this new application, I'd like to change this behavior. We can run CI and test those changes, making it a really powerful system for changing kind of this data that can leverage all of the extensibility of the GitHub platform. So with that out of the way, I'm just going to be showing you a YAML file. And that's the YAML file. This is an excerpt from our production configuration. I've simplified it a little bit, changed a couple of values just so you don't know exactly what bucket we use. But otherwise, that's it. That's the configuration. You can see with this configuration that they've started with those three questions. What's the name of the application? Who looks after it? We call that an owner. And what kind of application it is. Now, in this case, they've said that it's a static application. So we're going to assume a bunch of standards. For example, at Seek, our static applications use, they generate their HTML at build time, and then they'll publish that to an S3 bucket using kind of an agreed contract where they'll generate versions for every environment, every site, every language, and they'll put that under a certain contract in the bucket. And so we know we're going to need to know what that bucket is. So CI will fail. Your JSON schema, your IDE will say, hey, this is missing a bucket. So they tell us the bucket. You also tell us what sites you want to run on. And we want to make it really easy to do the simple thing. And the simple thing would be to run on all of the candidate sites or all of the employer sites. You know, if you're only running on some of them, then maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. So we keep the configuration for the simple version very light. Only once we've added all of that information do we want you to tell us about the actual page. In this case, you've given us a name and you've given us a path. There's plenty more things that you can configure here, but the default is just to do things the standard way. Because of that, we're going to make a bunch of assumptions. Once you add that configuration in, we're going to give you /profile/me because that's what's configured. That's what you've asked for. That seems pretty obvious. But at Seek, we use multiple languages, and we put that language in the URL for SEO reasons. So we're going to give you that path as well. If you go to the Thai website and you request the Thai language, you will use that URL, and that's going to work by default. You don't have to say, I want localization. You get localization by default. But also, we do care about SEO. And so for any valid routes, we will default to stripping the / for you. Again, you can configure that behavior, but the default is to do what is expected and what is normal. But you also have a website. Because you have a website, we want you to load some CSS and some JavaScript. We have a way of loading CSS and JavaScript by starting with a prefix of /static. And so we'll load up that route for you and direct it to the S3 bucket with that agreed contract. And we're going to optimize that traffic for static assets with the appropriate caching that you would expect. So we've done all of that just from that little config. But but YAML files aren't going to get us very far. We need to turn those YAML files into a working model, something that will help feed into our worker and be a useful, highly efficient host map. One of the main tools we use here is called Zod. If you haven't heard of Zod, I'm a big fan of Zod. It's a type-safe tool for defining schemas, and it really leverages that power of JavaScript to have a really composable solution. You can compose together types and rules to build what is ultimately a very, very complex system. I'm jumping ahead on my slides here. Compose rules together to combine simple rules into a complex system. You can provide that really helpful validation and error messages by providing clear messages to the user, both when they're opening up their IDE and they're running and they're editing the configuration, when they run linting locally, but also in CI. So they're getting checks all the way along, getting that early feedback where possible. And also, because we're using Zod and we've got these defined schemas, they are exporting their TypeScript definitions, which means we can use type-safe transformations, which is kind of important when you're changing code that's being run on every request that comes in to Seek. Kind of important to get that one right. So type safety is really important there. So assuming we've done that, we've had the YAML files. The YAML files have been turned into a working model with JavaScript. That's great. What can we do with it? Well, this is where you get a little bit sidetracked because there's more things you can do than just drive a worker. For example, we have a software catalog at Seek. We use Backstage. The software catalog allows product owners to see what they own and be able to sort of look up, hey, here's my team, here's what I own, here's what I need to look after. If I need to change things, where do I need to change things? And so we export all of these routes, all of these sites, all of these brands into our software catalog. So you can visualize it in amongst all of your systems and services, databases, and other resources that you might own. We also built a route lookup tool so that customer support can go over to a little tool and put in the URL and work out the Slack channel, the email address of the team that they need to talk to about that bug with that one page. We publish a bunch of NPM packages, such as a sites package that becomes a bit of a source of truth for engineers to know what sites will support what languages, as well as parsing and just generally understanding the URLs that they work with day to day. And then, of course, there's the router. That's kind of the topic of the talk. To allow users to sort of seamlessly switch between these applications. I have a couple of examples for you. Here's an example of using that route matching tool. In this case, we've typed in jobstreet.com.my/profile/me, and you can see it's worked out that the brand is JobStreet. It's the English language, it's the candidate product, it's the candidate JobStreet MY site, and most importantly, we've got a link down the bottom there to a Slack channel to say, hey, profile team, I've got a problem. I think I've got a bug here. I found a bug for you to fix. An example of a publish NPM package. So you can publish these, they can provide helpful information to our engineers so that they don't have to recreate what's a valid brand, what's a valid language, what's a valid site. With all of that out of the way, we've got our model. Model hopefully works. We need to build the actual worker. The worker's kind of a simple thing, though. Once you've got the model, you're really just writing a bit of simple JavaScript. You're looking up a map and you're sending requests. It's all just working with fetch and fairly simple. But we should probably review what the kind of responsibilities of this worker are. At its core, all it's going to do is it's going to look up in that map the application, and that's going to return what we call an origin. An origin is somewhere you're going to go to service that application. That might be an S3 origin. In this case, go to the AWS S3 bucket. It might be an internal URL and needs to route things into our nice sensitive internal managed network, or it might be an external URL where we need to route sort of more directly but more openly, and in which case it might want to take a few precautions such as stripping cookies or doing other security concerns. Sorry, I've jumped. Sorry, that's looking up the origin, and then we're going to send a request to that origin, which will have those differences that you might need to handle. Other examples for sending the request is, what if you send the request to a server-ended application? That server-ended application throws an error, returns a 500. You want to grab that grab the response and return a more normalized server error page on behalf of the application. So you can see we're sort of starting to get into this territory of adding in a bunch of additional responsibilities. For example, we might want to check whether the request needs to be blocked for maintenance. What if the site is down for maintenance? We want to send redirects back on behalf of the user. We saw that before with the profile config. We might want to access preview versions of the application. What if you could select the specific version you wanted to load up of a website? And really much more. And that's really where we get into the power of having JavaScript at the edge, is now if you can write it in JavaScript, and I challenge you to find things that you can't write in JavaScript. You might not be able to write it performantly, but you can probably write it. If you can write it in JavaScript, we've probably considered adding it. We might not have got around to building it yet, but we could. What does a worker look like? If you haven't written a worker before, they look a lot like a service worker, like you might write for the browser. They're a pretty simple object, and this is our worker. It exports an object. That object has a fetch method. That fetch method takes a request. That request has a URL, and we're going to grab the URL. All right, great, we've got the URL. What are we going to do with it? Let's pull out the host name and pull it into our host config. Our host config is all of our different hosts. Host map, pull out the host config for that particular host, and we're just going to send it to this router, this other NPM package that we've published that allows us to route traffic given a host name and a certain request. Go send it there. Doesn't really mean too much without actually looking what that router is. Sorry, looking at the actual router. So let's look at the router code. The router code, once again, it's going to kind of follow those first two core responsibilities. It's going to look up the origin. And I won't show you the actual code for get origin, but you can imagine it's going to look in this host map and it's just going to say, hey, for this path, find the origin. It's a little bit more complicated than a simple, dot into a file, because you might have wildcards that you need to check for, but that's pretty much all it's doing. We're going to pull out the information, and one thing you'll notice I pull out is the ownership info. The reason we pull out the ownership info is because we want to log the ownership info with any logs about our request. Because when an engineer is coming in and saying, hey, what's happening with my traffic? Do they want to know what's happening with that application or what's happening with that route? What if they could just say, tell me all about my routes? Just show me a dashboard of all of the traffic for the profile team. And so we include the ownership information in there. So any dashboards can be sort of filtered by the owner and not necessarily needing to know the details of the application. Another example of something that we can kind of put into the router and is maintenance. I mentioned maintenance, and I really like the maintenance example. A site going down for maintenance seems very simple. If it's down for maintenance, show the maintenance page. But what if the person accessing the site is a test user that gets to bypass maintenance because otherwise you can't test whether the site is ready? What if you're progressively rolling out the maintenance page and you want to do a sort of a percentage rollout based on some kind of sort of visitor ID? What if you've got certain traffic like the maintenance pages, CSS and JavaScript, that gets to bypass the maintenance page because You need to be able to load, so you need to, bypass the maintenance check because you need to load the maintenance page. So even though it seems simple, it's a little bit more complicated than you might want to write into a configuration, but it's really easy to write in JavaScript. Because just me describing what I've said there, I'm sure is already seeming like it's just a bunch of if statements. If test user, if site is currently down for maintenance, probably another critical piece. So it gets really simple to sort of just put this as a simple JavaScript function that you can put into your router. And if it's not down for maintenance, we send it to the origin. And the origin is handling origin, as I said, is going to do a few sort of more complicated things. It starts simple, but as we have the power of being able to sort of intercept requests with JavaScript, we can take on more and more responsibilities. I mentioned the server error page. What about 404 pages? Let's standardize that. What about, we've got the redirects, but we've also, nope, that's it. All right, let's jump straight on to how it's going, because surely that's the important thing. Hopefully this has been successful, otherwise I'm going to look really foolish. So let's find out. Outcomes. We've been in production for over a year. So for us, this isn't a brand new system, but it is sort of enough that we've really validated our approach and we just keep putting more into it. So it's in production for over a year with not too many hiccups along the way. It's now got 80 plus applications. This is all in the talk title, 80 plus applications, 20 teams, 19 sites, 3 brands, 3 languages, and 8 regions. So it's fairly mature at this point. It's in there, it's working. But the thing I'm more excited about is less that it's just working and more the ability for us to standardize a bunch of patterns across all of these applications, across all of these teams. We can create these defined standard patterns. Trailing/normalization, I gave the example of, but what about preview URLs for our web applications? What if there was just one easy way for everyone to opt into that? Serving static assets as a standard pattern, publishing static assets in AWS S3 bucket, implementation of common cookies that all of our sites use, maintenance and migration mechanisms. I haven't talked about migration mechanisms, but that's probably the most exciting one. What if we wanted to move an entire domain from one site to another or merge domains together? All these kinds of complexities can be just built into this one worker and built into our model. And it just keeps going. There's always more things that we can write, always more things that we can standardize because we have this powerful tool that sits up front of all of our sites. But I don't know if you've heard, but JavaScript is slow. It's very slow. And serverless is really inefficient at scale. So it goes very linearly. So you can imagine as you start getting to these like ridiculously high usage, it's so expensive. And it absolutely is. JavaScript is undeniably slower than some more computed languages or system level languages, and serverless can be sort of a linear cost that kind of grows as your usage grows, and if your usage grows exponentially, then your costs do too. So let's have a look at how slow is it, and also how much it costs. Well, currently, it's running in less than a millisecond. So for context, if you were to tell me, oh, Jahred, I've found this so much better solution than JavaScript. We don't need to use this slow. This is going to be twice as fast. You have now saved users 0.5 of a millisecond on their request, not 0.5 of a second, 0.5 of a thousandth of a second. I can't say I'm too excited, but yay. You've also, it currently costs us 0.1% of our combined infrastructure bill, which means if you were to say, Jahred, I've found a solution that's going to cost half as much, you're going to save so much money. You have saved Seek 0.05% of their infrastructure costs. I'm not that excited. Saving money is good, but that's just not going to hit any headlines. So there is absolutely a hypothetical solution that is faster and cheaper, but to compare that against having a solution that uses a language that serves front-end engineers, that all front-end engineers understand and know, that's so easy to compose with so many great tools and so many ability to not just use it in the worker, but also to change the model and can be so multi-usable, doesn't seem worth the trade-offs of moving away. I do want to wrap up now. I've got a bunch of, I'd love to sort of stop for questions, but before I do, I did want to mention that we are hiring for exactly this system and the web platform that we're using there. We have a limited number of roles in my team. So please do ask. And so if you are interested, you can talk to anyone at Seek, and I'm sure they will help you specifically ask for a role in front-end practices. I know I am biased, but it is an amazing team to work for, and these are some pretty cool tech to work on. You've got the QR code there, but also just feel to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter, sorry, X. I'll happily have a chat with you and see if we can find you a role. So thank you very much. That's been my talk on using JavaScript to the edge to scale micro frontend.
All right. Thank you so much. So, questions? You should have a lot of questions since no one raised your hand when, yeah, please.
I'm a little bit familiar about micro frontends because I've used Astro before. So is this the same approach with Astro, or is it a totally different approach that you're using?
Astro, I'm not familiar with Astro. All I mean by micro frontends is that when we started migrating to our new system of React, teams were building their own applications from scratch. We ended up building a sort of a UI framework that allowed people to sort of template out their languages, their applications in a sort of very common way that template could be sort of live and continually updated over time. So teams were sort of all building their applications together, but they were individual applications. And so a user sort of navigating our website. Absolutely. But you're splitting it up by the page level. So as you're moving between, you're loading new applications. But good question.
Okay. So if you guys want to mingle, those behind, you can go behind the wall if you want to mingle. If you want to sit, there's not enough chairs. There's a lot of chairs on my left-hand side here. So come in front a bit. Okay, next question.
Hey, I'm just curious. I'm not sure if you've explained this before, but is there a particular reason why it is an edge function over just like a regular Lambda function?
Yeah, it's a really good call. We wouldn't need to. In fact, one of the things that we could do is run the equivalent of our worker, our current compute, not even as a Lambda function, but inside our sort of our data center that we run the majority of our compute with, which we have a lot of standard practices for. It would be an option. But so many of our solutions are doing things like redirects, and you don't really need to ingress all the way into your data center just to decide whether the user needs to knock off a / from their URL. So it's not necessary, it's not required, but it's an amazing platform. I really like working with CloudFlare Workers. And I would also, actually, I have a better example for you. We've been in production for over a year. Of that time, I've been on call for about a third of that time. I have never, ever got a call waking me up in the middle of the night. CloudFlare Workers win. We don't have production instance because we can work such a reliable solution. For a front-end practices team, a team that works with front ends, don't need to think about the infrastructure. It is pretty powerful. So it's not necessary by all means, but it's pretty powerful and we love it.
Until CloudFlare goes down. Just okay. So anyway, okay. I will have one more. So anyway, talking about CloudFlare, we actually might have something in future about CloudFlare if I find my way there.
Hello, my name is Joe. My team is trying to implement CloudFlare Workers, and I wanted to ask, I saw in the documentation, there's about a 15 millisecond delay. I know the CloudFlare Workers are basically a pass-through for the request to go and come. The first question I want to ask is, have you guys ever tried to reject requests right from the CloudFlare Worker? And also, have you ever dealt with the body of a request in the CloudFlare Worker? Because I know it's a read stream and you have to wait for the whole request to come back.
So we deliberately don't. There are things that we'll do to hijack things that we could do in HTML, but where possible, we do that at the header layer. So returning what's the hreflang as a header rather than HTML. And what we do is we say, if it does require modifying the body, we leave that to teams specifically because of the performance impact of the body. So no, we don't. The rejecting a request, we make use of Cloudflare's WAF as well as we have a layered WAF solution. So we wouldn't be responsible from a security perspective blocking the request, but there is work ahead of us to do that. If you're talking about blocking a request because that's not a valid request, absolutely. On our sites, if it's not a known URL, we just reject the request at the edge with a 404.
Okay.
Great question.
Last question. Yes, I'm waiting for yours.
How is your CI/CD process? CloudFlare is nice, but their RBAC sucks.
Sorry, you're going to have to repeat the question.
To do all your deployments, right? So how do you securely, I'm sure not all the members of the team have like full access to the whole CloudFlare, right? But CloudFlare's RBAC is quite terrible. It's not very granular.
It's certainly not powerful, would be the term I would use, but and so we do use a relatively simplistic solution, but ultimately it's just being deployed by a CI/CD environment that does have a deployment token. And what we do is, because we've been able to centralize all of our compute into this one worker, it's not a situation where everyone in the company is going to need access to CloudFlare. There's a very limited access. You compare that, for example, to AWS, which needs to be really powerful because every engineer in the company is in some way interacting with AWS and getting control to it. So it is a simple solution. It's good enough for us because it has a very limited access control. I know that we are definitely wanting more complex access control, but it's not been a problem.
Okay. All right. With that, thank you so much, Jahred, for your talk. If you have any more questions, you're going to stay around. Maybe go for a drink or whatever later on. You can just ask more serious question, more private question, what you can ask him later on. So next, I need to stop. It's my turn. So you're going to hear me talk a bit. All right, cool. So good. So first, you guys are very lucky to to come here today because we have about 50 to 60 people on waitlist. So yeah, so it's not easy. And I was actually filtering to the list as well, like who and who not, and like who's a scammer or not a scammer or just joking. So yeah, so you guys feel lucky to be here today, okay? And in future, if you guys really can't make it, just do not going. So at least people who really want to come can come as well. Because actually a lot of people was like private message me asking, oh, can I make it still or not? But I've been given a strict instruction by SeekAsia. So yeah, limited. Anyway, so I think next is the thing about latest with KLJS. So KLJS been running for years, more than 5 years now. So and we have also another almost defunct, almost going down, slow dead kind of JavaScript Malaysia group as well, right? So with Greg, so what we did is in Facebook, Greg is over there. So we combine it. So in Facebook, he's going to manage it. And outside of Facebook, it's me. One reason is I hate Facebook now. So no, I'm just joking. But yeah. Anyway, so that's the update. And moving on, the earlier you saw Dev Malaysia. DevMalaysia.com is actually a mixture of few meetups that been done locally for a couple of years now. One is Junior Developer Malaysia. Is actually the background of it came from Austria, Singapore, and then I introduced it in Malaysia like before pre-COVID. So that's supposed to be a big thing. So we have a meetup and mentor and all the planning coming up soon, mentorship as well for that one. Another one is DevOps Malaysia. That's the biggest one so far. So we had about 300 plus. That one also on wait list, a couple of people. So yeah, so with GitLab. Next one may or may not be CloudFlare. So let's see. Having said that, I'm going to continue with the latest thing happening in JavaScript. In Twitter, if you go on Twitter, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, right? Google laying off people, Python Foundation team, or Flutter, right? And then JavaScript is still going active and going aggressively and growing good. So, and Next.js is one of the good one that's going on now. Been a while. I think a lot of companies are trying to adopt Next.js if they're not too late to the game. And yeah, so this, if you don't know, it's 8th birthday and it's already 1 million active developers and it's coming soon with the Next.js 15 as well. So yeah. And the rest, I'm going to quickly jump to it. Another one, Node.js. So who loves Node.js, right? I mean, last time we were doing JavaScript meetup, a lot of people when doing Node.js, the recruiter would ask me, do you know any Node.js developer or not? So I think nowadays these are rare people who actually does the Node.js. I think it's more to a server language and stuff. So currently Node.js version 22 is released as well. I'm just gonna pretend I didn't see this because you can read anyway. So and then I'm just gonna talk about this one. So again, the down below EXO 7.2, which is like Node.js power SDG style block framework. I think one of the things that everyone want to do their own block. So what they do, they invent their own thing and then they try to make it happen and work, right? So this one I try out a bit. It's same as what they say. It's a bit like Jekyll, but using Node. So you can check it out later on. The source is there as well. And then this is another news I found where actually like this is very latest by the April 11. So Microsoft actually uses React Native a lot for all their cross development platform as well. You can go read the link there. I mean, if I share, okay, Google it or ask ChatGPT for that link. And another thing I found and which I think should be shared. Okay, ignore the no alternate test provided. So so this is basically what happened in JavaScript. If you're new to JavaScript, I noticed some of people are quite new. You should understand not to get lost in JavaScript world. There's a lot of things going on. Server, front end, back end. Everyone want to do a full JavaScript. So if you notice, just Google. I mean, just follow by go and then JavaScript explain. You can find the diagram. Basically, a very simple way of explaining how JavaScript world is and working, right? Because you can't read this anything. I'm very sure it's too small. So yeah, another thing I want to announce is about CTJS Singapore conference. So Singapore, the guy that organizes is my friend, so he reached out to me. So they're doing a conference on 24th and 26th July. You do get a discount for KLJS people. So there's a promo code. Still working on that. They're also looking for speakers and sponsors. So if you want to be a speaker, apply to top. And who knows, you might be there, right? And it's quite interesting also, the JavaScript there. And if you don't know the background is, this is like third year they're doing this as well. Their workshop as well. You can go check it out. Of course, you have to pay in Sing dollars unless you get a company to sponsor you. So with the currency, I think it's probably 3.3. So convince your boss to sponsor you guys. And don't find a job there and stay there. Please come back. So another one happening, you might see me giving a talk there. It's about DevOps and GitLab, talking about transmitting DevOps. So they have one guy flying over from US for the GitLab as well. So it's happening on 14 May, 10 a.m. to 2:30 at Element Hotel. So I think, yeah, I can share the link really, so later on, the previous email. So you can just register yourself as well for that one. And yeah, having said that, I think pretty much done. It's a very short one. If you want exciting Buzzcorner, come for DevOps. That one we share a lot interesting. So shoutouts, we want speakers. So really want speakers. We want more people to give speaking talks and everything. So please reach out. I think there's a lot of event going on. We're not enough speakers always. So please reach out to us or me. And now is the hiring shout out. So anyone hiring other than the host? Yes, I let the host to be last. You hiring.
So I'm from N Group and International. Yeah, we are hiring massively right now, front end, back end, mobile. Yeah, so you can shoot me the resume if you want. Yeah, come look for me if you want. Or you can just look up. There's an army of recruiters out there hiring for N International. So I'm sure some of you have already been approached. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're hiring about 100 plus, right? Yeah. Based in G Tower or moving to TRX already? Next May. Okay. Yeah, TRX. So they're going to compete with Money Lion for the talent. I go there first.
Hi and Assalamualaikum everyone. I'm from Leon Classroom. So we are looking for front end, junior, and also a full stack senior for Leon Classroom. So we have two positions open right now. We are a startup, small startup, and we are doing something interesting for children. So if you are interested in that field, can contact me.
That usually means some equity involved. So Okay.
Hi, I'm Azri from BPlease. So we're hiring a backend developer for Rails and Ruby and Laravel. So if you're interested to join, so you can send your resume or CV to love@bplease.com. Thanks.
So just remember their faces and go find them. Yeah, and it's also good to hear Ruby after a long time. You first.
Hi, I'm Lavanya. Again, I'm the engineer director in Seek. We have many open roles, whether from engineer, senior engineer, staff, lead, engineering manager. We have a lot of open roles for JS, whether that is TypeScript or React, but we also have mobile, native, whether iOS or Android. So if you're interested, please reach out to me, or you can see some of the QR code we scanned. One of the things about Seek is you work in an APAC team. So there's no KL team or there's no Melbourne team. As you see, Jahred does now even is hiring for his team. Basically, it's one team. So that's the opportunity you'll get to work with a truly APAC team.
Sounds exciting, and make sure they pay you well as well. Actually, they do lah. To be honest, they do. So
I am Joven from Pickles Auction. So our parent company is actually from Australia. So we are hiring for tech lead, senior software engineer, usually full stacks. Yeah, you get, at least I and my coworkers get a new MacBook. 1 day work in the office, 4-day remotes. So yeah.
honest, you need to try harder because most of the company does that, MacBook and working from home.
Hello, everybody. Usually I will hire for SRE. I'm still hiring for senior SRE, but on behalf of my senior leads for the web backend, right? Yeah, do come look for me. We use React and React Native. Don't talk to me about JavaScript, but yeah, CloudFlare is very interesting. So
Yeah, or you can propose to him something. If he's buy it, you can sell it to him. So anyone else? Going once, twice. Okay, no more, right? Okay, good. Nature is healing. Seems like a lot of people hiring. So I think we're going to the last talk for the night, which is second talk as well. Web Founds without a Jank by Michael. Michael is here? Okay, ready. All right, cool. So yeah, go ahead, Michael. It's all yours. And I will.
Yeah.
All right, go. Is the chicken still there or is finished already?
Okay, mic check. That's really. Oof. Is that any better? Yep. Cool. All right. Page Jank. I'm sure you've all come across this where you visited a website and as soon as you've gone to click on something, the layout shifted underneath what you were trying to interact with. That's what I'm here to talk to you tonight about and how we can leverage font metrics to reduce that bouncing settings icon at the bottom. Speaking of layout. Hello. Which screen's that on? Thank you. Yes, so how we can leverage font metrics to reduce that layout shift within our experiences. But first, a little bit about myself. So my name is Michael Taranto. I'm the design system engineering lead at Seek in Melbourne, Australia, where I look after the Braid design system as well as some supporting tooling that enables our product teams to deliver faster or more consistent experiences at scale more quickly. In terms of on the web, I'm pretty much everywhere as Michael Taranto, whether it's X, GitHub, LinkedIn, you'll find me online if you search for that handle. But let's dive in. I'm sure at some point we've come across these acronyms before, the flash of invisible text, FOIT, versus the flash of unstyled text, FOUT. You can probably pronounce it several different ways. And we've been talking about these for years, and browser vendors have been trying to help us out, introducing new, I'm going to ignore this, right? It's going to keep happening all talk. Browser vendors have been giving us new CSS properties like font display that allow us to have fine-grained control over when we switch between that fallback font and the web font that we've specified. Outside of the browser features itself, we've also shifted our best practices where we've moved our font face declarations from being in external style sheets inline into the style tag within the head, just to reduce one of those blocking steps in downloading the web font. Rather than having to download the style sheet to discover a font to then download, we've removed one of those steps entirely. So best practices are evolving. And nothing gets away from the fact that if we want to render text with a web font, we have to download it first. It's an unfortunate part of the web is you can't use anything that you haven't downloaded yet. It's not a native app. And it's sort of at odds with this desire to present content really quickly and performantly and stably. So a quick visual recap of these two acronyms I called out earlier, the flash of invisible text and the flash of unstyled text. So this is exactly the same page. You can't see anything on this one. It's invisible because the web font hasn't loaded. This one is displaying our fallback. So it's the unstyled text. Now, when the web font loads, it looks exactly the same. So sure, the user doesn't care. But the path to get there, the user definitely does care. We might have lost God knows how much percentage of our traffic at this point because the page didn't load. They've already clicked away. They didn't care. And so Google's introduced metrics that we do care about. Sorry, Google in my pocket. Has introduced metrics that we do care about. And so it will penalize pages like this for delayed presentation of content. And so their SEO score will suffer. But it's not without trade-offs for the unstyled text, where we can also be penalized for cumulative layout shift, where if we pay attention here, we've got 5 lines. Web font loads, I've now got 7. So the whole page, that jank I spoke about at the start of the talk, that's where it's happening. But as an industry, we've started to shift towards FOUT as our preference. So if you've ever used a font from Google Font without specifying a font display property, you're probably getting the swap value by default, which will instantly present the fallback font, and then when available, switch to the web font. And that's because we're valuing the presentation of content as the highest priority. Let's get the user their content as quickly as possible. So if that means we're preferring FOUT, then how can we fix the unstyled text? Because that's what's causing this page jank, is we're wanting to show the content as quickly as possible, but it doesn't our fallback and our web font are just so different that that's resulting in the jank. So the first step's logical. Just choose a better fallback. Choose something that visually looks like your web font. The closest anatomically, the closest, are they a serif, sans serif, monospace? Choose the right fallback for your web font. But then also its availability. Every platform has different built-in. There is a core sort of web safe set, if you like, but you want to look at where your user base is, what devices they're using, and make sure that the web font that you're selecting is most highly available. It's not an exhaustive list. It's not the system font stack that everyone lauds as the goal for most of our products. But speaking of fallback, CSS has been busy in the background. They're zooming in on fallback fonts too with some new features, and that's what we're going to explore today. And we're going to explore how JavaScript can enable the use of those features, because CSS can't do it all on its own. So let's have a look at a font face declaration. So here we've given our web font a name, web font, very creative, followed by a source. Now to apply that to a class, we can just add it into our font stack. So font stacks read left to right, highest preference on the left. So we've created our font face declaration, put it at the start of our font stack. We apply that class, and we've got our web font. Where CSS has been busy working is this font alias world. So the idea of creating another font face that doesn't reference a URL or a path on disk. It's grabbing a local font. It's grabbing Arial.
That's pretty much everywhere, not an Android, but it's pretty much everywhere. And so we can give it a new name, still Arial, but it's got a new name. And then we can override some of those presentation properties. So we can start to play with the metrics that are built into Arial and make it appear a little bit different. Now that we've created that alias, we can slot that straight into the font stack. So we're going to unpack a little bit of why this is a good idea, but this is the technique that CSS has given us. And what's great about it, it's coming from CSS. And CSS is progressive enhancement all the way down. What do I do when I load? If I've got something else available, I'll use it. We've got support queries. We've got font stacks that will find what's available and just seamlessly pick the one that works. So the fact that CSS is giving this solution, we're not having to check the JavaScript environment. Do I have this font available? Can I apply it? There's no font load API checks. It's all just static CSS. But I'm sure at this point you're asking, what the heck are these percentages? Like 73.3225. Well, what we're doing here is we're saying, I want Arial, but I want a version of Arial. I want it to appear to take the font metrics of my web font. So I want to change its ascent property to be this magic number. What's a font metric? Well, font metrics are built into every single font you've ever used. The font author is preloading that font. They're designing their font using these very numbers. So I'll highlight a few of the key ones for today's talk. There's the M square. Each of these characters has its own M square. It's basically a canvas or an artboard that the glyph is drawn on. Remember that one. We've got the baseline. The baseline's sort of the 0 point, that plane that a lot of the other metrics are measured from. Metrics like the ascender, how far above baseline do we go? The descender, how far below baseline do we go? And then we've got line gap. Only a handful of fonts use this, but some of the key ones, where between individual lines of wrapping text, I might want some additional space. So we need to consider that as well. Fortunately, we've got a little bit of experience with font metrics. How many people have heard of capsize? That is fantastic. Gives me something to talk about. So we've built an entire JavaScript ecosystem around font metrics that allows us to generate CSS solutions for typographic problems. The color contrast is horrible. Trust me, it looks better in production. But we can see here there's a set of those metrics that we've spoken about for this particular font. Here's my M square, cap height, ascender, a few of those metrics. Now, I can choose from a set of these system fonts. So we can grab Courier and have a look at its metrics. We can jump over to Google Fonts. And if I'm feeling a little bit swanky and moo-moo, my network will drop out. But we can extract all the font metric, whether it's a system font or a Google font, they're all statically available. So trust me, that'll work if you go to the site. So we've seen the new CSS properties. We understand what font metrics are and that we've got access to them. But now we want to bring these things together. How do we use these font metrics to build a fallback font? So we'll start by installing this metrics package that was powering the site that we just saw. So we can install the capsize metrics package and import Arial, for example, and get this JSON object representation of what we just saw on that visualization. Remind you again, that's for every Google font, all 1,600 of them statically available that you can import their metrics. Some of these align to the values, the overrides that we saw in the fallback CSS. So ascent, descent, and line gap. They were the three properties that we wanted to override in our font alias. So keep an eye out for them because we're going to use those very shortly. Not all fonts are on Google. So if you've got your own, whether it's licensed or you're pointing to another service, Capsize can also unpack that for you, extract in from a file, pass it a path, or equally from a URL, And it'll end up with the same data structure that you're statically installing from all the fonts that are available on disk. So we sort of end up with these two parts of the puzzle. We've got our metrics and we know what we want to do with them. So now we're going to join these two worlds together. So again, zooming in, we've got our sent value for our metrics and we've got our override, so where we want to get to. And the set of metrics for the fallback font being Arial, we want to override that with the ratio, and that's what this percentage is. It's a ratio of the web font metrics. So if we're talking about the ascent, we want to take the ascender of the web font and express that as a ratio of that M square, the canvas that the character was drawn on. And so if the ascender of our web font was 70% of the height, that's going to be our override value. That's a simple enough calculation. We can grab our web font metrics, grab the ascent property, divide it by our M square, and we got it. Done. Let's run that for descent and line gap, and we're done. We can now take those values and just template that directly into our CSS. So this is just a handlebars template. I'll convert it to a percentage, so we'll multiply it by 100, but that's all it is. And then we get our magic numbers. Now that we've created our font alias, we've got our web font and our system font, but we want to insert that fallback font right there in the middle as well. So that's cool, but how's it look? So this is our SeekAsia's web font. And if I overlay, that's just traditional Arial. There's nothing special there. That's the default. You can see there's no properties apart from just giving it a different name. What you're looking at on screen is Jank, because this orange text loads instantly when the page paints. The web font kicks in. The difference between that orange and white text is the reflow that happens on your page. So that's what we want to fix. Let's now apply our overrides. So the calculations we just did, suddenly we get this harmonious baseline alignment and sort of this similar anatomy and presentation. It's still Arial. It's just been augmented to align with the properties of our web font. It's pretty cool. But the biggest gap is still that line length, right? So even though we've got that vertical alignment, you can imagine every line still going to wrap just as hard all the way down the page. That's where the next property comes in, size adjust. So size adjust allows us to scale that M square that each character glyph is drawn on. And so we can play with this to find just the right value, somewhere around there, that can now align Arial with our web font. It's crazy. So I'm sure there's a metric that can do that, right? We had the ascent, we had the descender. Surely there's an average character width metric in there somewhere. There is X average char width. It exists in one of the font tables internally, and it's actually been computed from the lowercase letters of A to Z, weighted by their frequency of use. So how often do they appear in written language? And we're going to use that to infer the average character width for a given font. Sounds sensible. So OpenType removed it from the spec. Now they've removed it in favor of, so the property still exists, but they've removed it with a value that is now the average of all non-zero width characters in the font, which is massive. And you don't use anywhere near that amount of characters in regular sentence form. And they've even gone as far in the spec to call out, do not rely on this particular property for estimating line length of text. So we won't do that. Feasibly, you can assume this is the globalization of their spec. They've gone from depending on lowercase Latin characters. It doesn't really scale to fonts that are now modeling Thai, traditional Chinese, or any of the other Unicode subsets that might appear. But the weighted character occurrence sounded really interesting. It sounds like exactly what we need for size adjust. So we thought, let's just rebuild it. Let's measure the character widths, reconstruct that average, and try and see if we can get a size adjust property working. So I forgot to mention earlier, Capsize is built on another open source package called FontKit that allows us to open a font, and you can do everything from browse its metrics to actually render PDFs in JavaScript, which is what Adobe originally built the package for. So we're going to open our font, and we're going to take the sample string that is exactly what we said, the lowercase a to z's plus space. And we're going to extract every glyph in the font that appears in that string and take the average of its width. The width of every character, we'll just roll it up into a single value. Now, that's a start, but the key point was the frequency of occurrence, because every character doesn't appear on every line. You get massive differences between letters like W and I and how frequently they occur in like written language. We can't assume that every character appears there. So we need to weight them by how likely they are to appear in a line in order to get a meaningful average. Cue Wikipedia. So we've taken the English letter frequencies from here. Unfortunately, they rolled everything into lowercase values instead of uppercase. We also had to refactor the numbers a little bit to include space, because that does appear quite a number of times in a sentence. And we generated some weighting data. So now we've got our A to Zs with weighted by probability of occurrence in English. We can now go to our calculation, and instead of just taking the advanced width property, we'll multiply it by that weighting so that it will give us something that we can actually work with. Jump back to our cap size metrics. Got something that looks half reasonable here. It kind of fits with the other values, like it feels like it might work. But how do we get from that metric to size adjust? So remembering this key point, we're scaling the fallback M square. So we've got that canvas of the fallback font, and we've got the canvas of the web font. We want to scale that fallback to align to the same scale that we have for our web font. And the whole point of getting the average was we want to take the average width as the ratio this time. So we're back to our calculations, but now we're taking our average width property and we're creating a ratio against the M square for the web font. We'll repeat this for our fallback. So we now know our average width as a ratio for our web font and our average width as a ratio for the fallback. That's it. That's size adjust. You ratio those two against each other, and that's all that CSS wants, and it's happy. However, you recall these values we calculated at the start of the talk? That was super simple. Just grab the ascender, and we'll just make it a scale of the M square. But we just said we're going to change the M square. We're going to adjust it. So we sort of need a loop back here and scale the M square of our web font, and then factor this scaled M square in here. So we're just substituting out the direct value for the adjusted one. Hopefully you're still with me, and we can now just drop size adjust in. And it's you just have to multiply it by 100. That's all you have to do. It's pretty straightforward. So let's have a look. This is where we left things. We have our web font. We have our metric override. So we're pretty close, right? We just had the line length problem. Now, if we size adjust that, we're doing all right. We're doing all right. This is getting pretty close. So you can imagine that a page that had all of that reflow happening due to the original, this is not even the original, this is the adjusted, that original offset that we had with Arial, we've just made Arial look almost identical to Seek Sans. Don't tell marketing. But that stabilized the experience incredibly. So we've basically introduced a web font with no trade-offs and no runtime JavaScript. It's all just CSS, progressively enhancing when the font downloads. It's a lot of work though. And the road to get here is very manual, a lot of calculations. That's what I told you Capsize does. Capsize takes font metrics and generates CSS solutions. So logic says we should have an API for this. So we did. Built an API to generate fallback fonts from our metrics in Capsize. So if we just consider a basic font stack where we pass in a list of fonts our list of font names here, pass the same list directly to cap size. But instead of passing the font names, we're actually passing the entire metrics objects that we've imported. So we can import that Google font, that system font, unpack your custom web font, whatever it is, and you pass it through in the same order you would just do your font stack in regular CSS. Now it's going to give us a couple of things. It's going to give us the generated font family that we need to apply. And it's going to build our declarations for us as well. Template those in. Haven't even had to multiply anything by 100, did you notice? Because it's all there. Done. So just some build time JavaScript to make CSS useful. Hopefully, still got that thing in the back of your head annoying you, but you just did what OpenType said wasn't good enough. You've just depended on lowercase English Latin characters A to Z, and that's true. That was the string that we pumped into our calculation. I've skipped over. That was good enough for prod. We took it all the way to prod for Seek ANZ, Seek New Zealand, basically any English-speaking site that Seek operated in. We delivered our design uplift that went from no web font to a web font. We did all this work and we didn't even tell anyone. Not a single metric moved with regards to SEO or cumulative layout shift. But we have to support Thai. And Thai doesn't know what A to Z is. So how can we level up this solution to now go past OpenType? How can we actually get these weighted values for other Unicode subsets? Sounds like a challenge. So we need to generate weightings from other localized bits of text, other written language. And we've got a massive library staring at us. Wiki News, 25 languages all over the world. Got articles on every given content you could imagine. And we found that there's an abstract against every article that's kind of a paragraph that has no markdown noise, no annotations, or a lot of the other characters that if you just try and analyze Wikipedia, you get a whole bunch of junk that's not actually used in written language. These abstracts were clean. So let's read them in. Let's take some data feeds. We've got English and Thai. Read in those XMLs. We'll grab the first 5,000 abstracts for each language and start counting. So we count the characters, how many times do they appear? And we weight those counts based on every character that we just counted. And then we trim the characters we don't care about, the sub 0.1% that aren't really going to impact our average character width. We got a bit of data. So we've gone from the A to Z that was very static, just lowercase, to now having multiple weightings for the different subsets. So we've got Latin and Thai examples here. And you'll notice a whole bunch of other things. We've got numbers, we've got punctuation, we've got capital letters. Like, this seems ridiculous in hindsight. Like, surely we use capitals in lines of text. Surely we use punctuation. And so we don't even care what's in here because we've taken it from this body corpus of content that it's like, you do the counting, just tell us the values. And if we roll that back to, remember we went to production with this. So we can't just throw that away. So what's the difference? Well, it wasn't much at all. So we've totally switched out our data set and it's just refined the number very subtly. And if we take that all the way through to size adjust, we're in the decimal places for English. Like it didn't move much at all. So that gave us tremendous confidence that we've gone from something that was hard-coded to something that was dynamic. And we're still able to sustain the benefit for English and other Latin character-based languages. So that means we're ready to rock. We can just drop in the Thai subset. So we've now got our X average width appearing there for Thai. Return to our create font stack, and we can now generate font stacks for any subset, or not any, Thai and Latin to start. Like, can't do it all. So this will now generate a font face declaration, that alias that CSS wanted us to, but it's specifically for this font combination for Thai characters. Let's have a look. This is Seek Sans in Thai. Very proud of it. Custom font that we've had built. we overlay the fallback font. Slightly different ones, the traditional ones, the more modern, so we could probably do a better job of our fallback selection, but nonetheless, we align its metrics. Sits on the same baseline, similar shape and form. And boom. So you'll notice over the line, our tracking's sort of playing about a little bit because we're working with averages. It's not a perfect science, but it looks pretty good at the end. Haven't hit production with this one just yet. The work's there. We just, we're in people's backlogs. So that will eventually go to production. And I'll redo this presentation with some layout shift numbers for you. But that's a bit of a win. So could it be, have we just killed page jank? Have we just decimated the whole web font layout shift problem that's plagued us for forever? Kind of. But even with cap size, this is horribly manual. Like you need to do all these. Well, you don't need to do all these steps. You can install cap size. But applying this solution is very technical and involved. But thankfully, because of the way that we've solved this out in the open, it's all open source, it's gotten on the radar of some pretty big projects. We're in the age of meta frameworks. I don't know how many people have noticed, but if you're playing with Vue, you've got Nuxt. If you're in React, you've got Next. Very similar, change your vowels. But the idea is that they give you best practices out of the box. This is a best practice. So why would you have to set it up yourself? So Nuxt have gone as far as to just make it a plugin. You install the Fontaine plugin in your app, and then you go build your website. It will find, as it's parsing your project, like the age of bundlers and all of our dependency trees that we build, it knows when you've pulled in a style sheet that has a font face in there. And it will automatically run cap size for you and generate the fallback fonts. All you had to do was add a plugin. Next, I had a big presentation about fallback fonts in Next. And it's now a default. So it was opt-in, it was experimental, but it's now a default. If you install any font from the Next font package, they will automatically opt you in to adjusting the fallback. So we've sort of got this, cap sizes on top of FontKit, that's open source. These are meta frameworks on top of Vue and React, open source. It's just open source all the way down, and everyone's coming together to solve these best practices and share their solutions. Now, we're not quite done, but the talk pretty much is. So what I'll leave you with is something that's coming soon. So there are other impacts to what can affect our line length, things like bolding of text, italics, etc. So all these other font variants have an impact, and we can support them. We're tech complete, but we haven't published yet. So this should come very soon, and we're able to then further improve our accuracy. So when you're constructing that font stack, you just need to choose stylistically which version of the metrics you want to play with. So to summarize our learnings, we've covered some of the new CSS APIs that gave us that sort of groundwork of use these, it'll help you with page jank. We've really unpacked a lot about the importance of fallback fonts. It's not just the system stack, it's got to be more than that. So really trying to put some effort in there. I'm not sure how many people have heard of font metrics before tonight. It's become a career pursuit for myself. So hopefully there's some take homes there. But if we wrap all this up, hopefully we'll go away and build much more stable and performant experiences for our users, which is really the end goal. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
So it's not over yet. Questions. He came all the way, so you need to ask a couple of tough questions. So I already have one earlier, someone asking, is this about AI or JavaScript? Someone asking earlier.
If I'm the AI, yes, but no, there's no AI involved here.
Yeah, so answer your question. So any other questions? Or you guys want to go home? Tomorrow is public holiday. So anyway, you need to ask 2 questions.
So does this improve the lighthouse score overall, and how much does it improve the lighthouse score?
Yes, hundreds all the way down. One of the biggest impacts of the Lighthouse score is that initial paint and anything that disrupts the layout. So I did touch on cumulative layout shift, which is a big part of that first paint. This basically, if web fonts are the cause of your layout shift, this will basically take you to 100 straight away. If your UI is got all kinds of reasons of things janking, you'll have to solve those as well. But yeah, it's definitely something that is one of the core metrics that Google's been pushing.
Okay, questions from the back. Yes, saw you.
Name is Tarek. I have a question. When you calculated the weighing for the characters width, was there any concerns about the industry of like, because you know the news is like very global, but sometimes you might have like technical industry, sometimes you have some health industry. So in your websites, if you, I mean, will we get a different values for the weighing when we have like for different industries, or like is it the same?
Based on the fact that the averages are coming from a certain set of content. Yeah, so I could probably lift that up even higher. So for the Latin characters, we analyze English, not French, not German. There's a myriad of languages we could have chosen. We've tested with those languages. So we had, so in an early collaboration with Google, when we were first doing the Next integration, they were testing some large sites that they had through Next, and we were more worried about the algorithm than what the input language was, because it was, once we got the algorithm right of which metrics to play with, the average was so meaningless that it wasn't, we didn't have to optimize by what type of content are we analyzing, what language are we using, just the Latin characters was enough. So yeah,
Okay.
so far so good.
Last question. Okay, last one, as usual. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just a simple inquiry. Maybe I got it wrong, so I was just trying to get it clear here. You spoke about the descent and the essence of the letter itself. Wouldn't there be a spot where you could find the original font you're trying to implement and see the exact attribute for that font and just like copy paste it, just to have the exact, the exact measurement you're trying to implement?
Yeah, so that's basic. So that's there in the the glyph information of how to draw it on the canvas, but that's different for every character. So the ascender and the descender metrics are consistent across the whole font library.
Sorry. The point is to see if there is a reference for that for the exact font you're trying to get, and see the exact measurement where you find the ascent and the descent, for example. It's just like copy paste it. I don't know if I got that part right. Just to get the exact, you're trying to play with the measurement just to get to the closest, the nearest to the font you're trying to implement, right?
Yes.
Right.
For the average line length.
Where there were like reference to the actual font you're trying to get, and it's just like copy paste it. Did you get me?
So most of the metrics are just family level, like it's for the entire font, no matter what character you're rendering. But when we're talking about line length, it's the sum of many characters. So there's not a single value that the author can put in the font for all of those characters. That's what the original open type metric was supposed to be, but that, as I said, it remained Latin based, so they retired it.
Okay, cool. You can continue later after this. Last question, because everyone's eager to leave. So.
I'm not a UI guy, but right now we just dump web font, and then the designers just use whatever, and then you use something similar, right?
And then the users pay for it.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Cool. So I saw a lot of people holding the bags and everything ready to get lift. So thank you so much, Michael.
No worries.
Yep. So glad to have you. That's the longest clap. So we're done for the night. So we have chicken behind still, I guess, if people didn't finish it yet. So the chicken didn't run away. So we might go for like maybe mama or like drinks or whatever after this. So if you're interested to join, you can join in as well. Place to be decided. So we just mingle around, come and talk to us, and we figure out where to nearby place to go. All right, cool. Thank you so much, and see you soon. By the way, anyone going for Microsoft event this Thursday? Okay, cool. See you there. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you for coming tonight. And please throw the rubbish away in the dustbin. And finish your food behind there as well. All right, cool.